back to Secret Weapons, and today we are taking a look at the Diablo by OKKO Effects. If ever you want a good example of how kind of America-centric this industry can kind of be, especially for us musicians who live in the US, this is the Diablo Dual Drive by OKKO Effects out of Germany. And this is a company that I have been kind of becoming more and more aware of over the past year or so thanks to social media, when in reality, they are celebrating their 20th anniversary this year, which just goes to show what I knew, apparently. Two things. Thing number one, happy birthday to OKKO Effects. And thing number two, this thing is very, very good. This is the Diablo with a giant orange LED light in the middle. It's actually really cool looking. And this is a 2-channel overdrive with a kind of a fun twist to it, which is essentially you have channel 1 and channel 2, a drive level and a drive level, and then along the top, a bunch of shared controls across the entirety of the pedal. And those controls are incredibly well thought out, very well implemented, and make this an astonishingly versatile drive pedal. The look of it makes you think it might be like a super high gain thing, and it can go high gain. It's very amp-like in that way that it can really roar or kind of pull back and be pretty demure, but it's an astonishingly versatile overdrive pedal. Let's talk about what is happening in this thing. From left to right up top here, you have a dynamics control, which is going to adjust the internal voltage of the pedal from 6 volts up to 18. At 6, you're going to get, less volume, but also more compression, quicker breakup, but also a different texture of drive at those kind of low voltage settings, something that almost hinges on something close to like a projector amp in terms of kind of a hairy lo-fi thing. And up at 18 volts, you've got that high fidelity wall of sound, very tube amp, like stacks of Marshalls behind you kind of response. Next to it, you have a feed control, which is going to be your input stage low-end buildup, essentially. And the reason I love that is because next to it, you have body, which is going to be your gain stage 1 low-end response. And if you're hearing that correctly, what that essentially means is you've got 2 stages kind of before your gain stage and in your gain stage where you can kind of refine your low-end's response. Whether you want less low-end hitting the clipping in the first place, and then subsequently how that low end responds in the clipping stage. And it results in a ton of control over probably the most important frequency range of a drive circuit, which is tightening and increasing and refining or blowing out or reducing entirely your low end response, the things that create mud in an amplifier. You have a ton of control over that in this pedal, which is especially good considering how much gain you have access to. And lastly, up on the top right-hand corner here, you have a tone control, which is going to basically be your high, mids, and treble buildup in the pedal as well. There is another interesting trick to this though. Internally in the back, you have a trim pot for a presence control. And my recommendation is if you pick one of these up, open this pedal up, fine-tune that. We're using a Matchless Lightning in this video. It's a pretty chimey amplifier. It's got a lot of like great treble to it. This thing had the potential to get way too bright, but that internal trim pot really did allow me to find like a sweet spot in terms of this pedal and the amplifier's bass relationship, and then from there use things like that tone control to kind of further refine exactly where I want to be. Below those, you have 2 3-position toggles, an input and a mid control. That mid control is going to be a flat response, a slight mid forward response, or a very modern sounding slight mid scoop. Again, it ties really well into that 18 volt setting and some of those refinements you can do with your low end pre-gain and in the gain stage itself. You can make a very modern sounding overdrive or a very vintage sounding overdrive depending on all of these controls working together so effectively. And lastly, you have this input toggle right here, which is kind of the original mode, a low gain mode for kind of your like closest to edge of breakup, sparkly, clean stuff, and then a kind of top boost sound where you have a little bit more gain at the input stage, but also a lot more treble, which once again, use that presence control, use that tone control, and get the exact right amount of kind of shine out of your overdrive. This thing is really well engineered. I think this is like version 3 of the Diablo over the past close to 20 years of the Diablo existing. So it tracks, but like some people rest on their laurels and some people improve and refine. And the Diablo feels like the product of years of refinement and focus. And I'm really, really enjoying it. It sounds excellent in my rig, even being a pretty present and bright overdrive into a very present and bright amplifier. This thing just mends and molds to kind of like make sure that it fits into a sound really effectively. And I'm having a blast playing with it, writing with it, and doing everything from really bone-breaking overdrives with things like that Beau Burchell signature Balaguer that you heard on that intro, all the way through some really amazing shimmery, shiny stuff that I've done with this pedal in other contexts with like single coils. It's deeply versatile. And the dual gain staging thing is also just so helpful. That's the only word for that. It's versatility where you need it and consistency where you want it in one pedal. Let's go to our sound samples. Let's just listen to it. It's fucking great. Okay, as always, before we get into our sound samples, let's talk through our signal chain and the context we are working in. I am playing my Jennings Navigator with Lambertone Crema humbuckers into the 29 Pedals EUNA, the Benson Germanium boost, the OKKO Diablo, the Universal Audio Astra, the Strymon El Cap, the Quiet Theory Prelude, and the Mercury 7. We're going to our amplifier, which is a Matchless Lightning, and then into the Universal Audio aux box. And we're using a 57 blended with a 421 for microphones in there. We have a splash of stereo plate reverb at the end of everything in that aux. And here is what our dry tone sounds like. Okay, so we've pretty much started with all knobs at noon, with the caveat of input and mids controls both being in the down position, because that's going to be basically, quote unquote, the original Diablo sound, kind of the V1 classic sound. So we're just going to start by activating the pedal, hearing how it sounds with all knobs at noon, and then we'll kind of play with our drive and level controls first, and then we will run through the two switches, the input and the mid switch, and then we'll run through the dynamics, the feed, the body, and the tone. So here is our clean tone, and here is the Diablo. So as you can tell right off the bat, a good amount of gain in this thing. It sounds pretty angry from the jump. It's not crazy high gain, but it is that very classically smooth kind of rock and roll sound, which is quite fun. This thing gets very, very gainy. I love it. It's very cool. A lot of gain there. So this input switch basically does one of three things for the kind of like initial first gain stage in the pedal. In the down position, you have the original Diablo sound. The middle is kind of a low gain thing, which you heard as we were kind of like running through the gain just now. Even drive at actual minimum in this thing still gives you some good saturation and some good clipping. And so that middle position is actually going to get you lower amounts. And then the up position is going to be kind of a top boost sound, which is going to be, added clarity for single chord or for humbuckers and a little bit more chord clarity when you're kind of like wanting that attack. So let's take input down, or let's take our gain to 0 for this, and then we'll kind of run through those, and then we'll hear them again up at mid gain. That middle position is great because it gives you kind of that, the thing that I've noticed a lot about the Diablo is that there's always a lot of presence and bite and teeth and treble in this pedal, even when you've gone in and adjusted that internal trim pot to kind of tame down a bright amp like I have. And that middle position gives you some great low gain clarity in those kind of sparkly versus something like and then you have the treble boost position. You can hear more clarity, more bite, more presence, but also a lot more gain. So for clarity, or for clarity between that and the original. And then dial back on the guitar itself for volume for a little bit of added clean. This thing is super touch responsive. Let's jump back to that kind of original mode and give that mids toggle a listen. It's a three-way switch. The down position, again, is going to be original Diablo pedal. The middle position is going to be a mid boost, and the up position is going to be a slight mid cut. So nothing too 5150 mid scoopy craziness, but definitely something with a little bit more of a modern twist to it. So this is your mid boost. love it for split octaves like that because it just adds some real kind of presence to something that might be a little bit thin without it. So no mid boost. And then a slight mid boost. And then a mid cut. Which can be great, especially on like something like the intro track that we did today, that Balaguer that has very modern sounding pickups and is also a pretty high gain D standard baritone guitar. Introducing some drive and having the option to cut a little bit of mids is quite nice, especially considering neither the amp nor anywhere else on that pedal or on the signal chain currently has a mid cut option or a mid control option. So like a slightly higher gain sound with the mids at the original setting. And scooped. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes you just want that scoop. Okay, let's go ahead and run across the top of the pedal now. You have dynamics, feed, body, and tone. And now I know based on the kind of layout of the pedal, it looks like they are channel assigned, but they're not. They are universal across both channels. And the beauty of this pedal is you can set just two different sets of drive and level, and everything else will stay kind of consistent for you. So you just find your kind of like sweet spots, and then you've got your low and high headroom areas. Let's start with the dynamics, which is going to be basically voltage scaling from 6 to 18 volts. So we are in the middle position right now. I'm not exactly sure where 9 technically exists, but let's take it down to 6 and then kind of like work our way up. Higher voltage sounds are going to be quicker to break up, have less headroom, have less clarity, but also a little bit more of a flabby low end, whereas as you turn it up, you're going to get more headroom, smoother distortion, and a more refined low end on your guitar. You'll also lose volume when you turn it down, of course. Let's actually go to that low gain input signal and drive all the way down so you can hear the difference. So we're back at kind of that classic like. So we're at that minimum gain thing that will give us a little bit of clarity and like some really great cleans if we just dial back our playing dynamics. Compensate up with that level a little bit. So even at minimum volume, we're getting a very consistent amount of breakup. It feels like it's compressing down into a clipping stage. Introduce a little bit of the actual intended clipping from the drive circuit, and you'll hear just how fast those minimum stages jump straight into breakup. getting more volume, we are getting less like essential clipping. Muting is a great way to hear how much that low end gets tightened up in that dynamic range too. And that's also going to give you kind of like the most traditionally full sounding drive when you crank it up too. So let's take that dynamic to minimum, dial in some actual drive, and then bring it back up to full 18 volts. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love that sound. That's a very, very classic kind of, you know, projector amp style grit. It just sounds like hi-fi, and it sounds great. And I love that there's a whole range in between those. Okay, so let's reset that input down to original and take a look at that feed control, which is going to be the amount of low frequency buildup in the input signal, which will basically allow you to kind of like tighten up and refine your low response. Say if you're like I am right now, playing a neck pickup humbucker. So that's flabby right there. That's not what we want. But on like, you know, high notes, neck pick or a bridge pickup, high notes, that feed maxed out just adds like a ton of weight to single notes. But if you're doing, that's bridge, or that's our neck pickup, by the way. That's a neck humbucker. Pretty nice to be able to get like great snappiness out of a neck pickup like this. That's fun. Especially with that that kind of like present treble boost thing. And again, for context, this thing can do a ton to sculpt tone. Okay, and we are back. Let's take a look at that body control, which is going to be the bass response in the first gain stage, which is not going to be kind of cutting bass frequencies at the outset of your pedal, but instead defining them relative to the actual gain stage of the pedal. As you can hear, it is a much more subtle version of things than feed is, which will really kind of paper out your sound if you're not careful. This really just kind of like tightens up the low end for a little bit more of a focused sound. And it's really, really collaborative with that feed control. I mean, you can hear right there, like maxing the body out will only do so much if you minimize that feed control, because that feed controls how much low end is even entering the clipping in the first place. Whereas if you have too much feed, too much low end coming in, body will serve to tighten it up and kind of refine it into a more focused and usable sound. Yeah, I really like that there is a kind of like two-stage low frequency control system here, which is quite nice. Actually, let's leave feed and body where they are right now because it feels pretty well balanced. That sound is, I mean, before we get into tone, our final stage of everything, let's just take a look at kind of where we're at right now. This thing is no joke. And then finally, let's take a look at our tone control, which is going to control both treble and high mids kind of as you turn it up. So it just kind of adds. You can keep it super far down for a somewhat dark sound, but nothing ever woolly, but it can also get really jangly. Like like I said, turning the tone down doesn't actually like throw a blanket over your signal so much as it does just, especially like you bring that top boost in. For a relatively clean or a relatively chimey and bright amp like I'm using right now, that's not an unusable sound. I mean, this is a little trebly for me, but again, everything on our rig right now is pointing towards treble. But I don't know why, but for some reason that doesn't like cause any like ear bleed or anything. Like even that tone maxed out stays pretty accessible, especially considering I've already done the work of opening up the pedal and kind of like setting my presence control. This thing does a lot. This thing gives you access to a ton of sounds and so much versatility as a kind of a gain stage, especially as one, technically two gain stages in your pedal board. It's pretty wild that you can get everything from it sounds really, really good.